Hey everyone, this is the YouTube character profile for Len Fairclough, which we originally recorded back on episode 112 of the podcast. Back about, 2 years after we'd started the show, and I think I have to make a confession, we didn't know very much about Len Fairclough, or had seen very much of him when we recorded this, at least, had we?
No, this was really interesting to listen back to, having watched him in quite a lot of episodes. We didn't really know what to make of him. Although, to be fair, I did say that he seems like the sort of person where the performance is gives more of the drama than the actual stories. Because the stories that he was involved in, fairly boring. It was mostly to do with
being a counsellor and being a builder.
Building and
all the stuff with Elsie Tanner was fantastic watching it back, I think. But yeah, I definitely... I mean, I must have seen clips of him, and maybe even... I know I'd seen him in a few episodes on the Granada Plus repeats, back in the day. But I never made much of him then. But rewatching the earlier episodes last year, I really grew a bit of an appreciation for him.
You didn't like Len.
No, I did. I always put him in the same camp as Ray Langton. And
you don't like Ray, do you?
And I didn't think I liked Ray before. Again, completely prejudiced, pretty much. And I didn't think I liked Len at all. But yeah, watching it last year, I still didn't really like Ray, but Len really did grow on me. I think it was a really decent, solid man.
He really was. I really liked watching Len. I mean, one day maybe we'll record all of our older character profiles, perhaps, but
paint him a bit more,
give him a bit of a better tribute. But for now,
so if you're a Len fan, I'm sorry. Yeah, what's about to come up is doesn't really, do
him justice.
No, that's exactly. But tis what it is.
Yeah.
And like Dara said, maybe one day we'll record it again and.
But anyway, here's two people that don't know what they're talking about telling you about Len Fairclough.
Enjoy. This week for our character profile, we're going to be looking at one of the old builders of the street. We've been seeing how the young guns have been doing at the moment with Jason and his building business, but we're going to go right back and look at Len Fairclough. Character that I didn't know anything about particularly before this started. I mean...
Could have asked me.
You don't know anything. I know you more than you.
Even more than me?
I know even more than you. He was... I mean, I watched him a bit on the classic episodes, and you see him on the clip shows and everything, but he's the kind of person that previously I'd not been particularly interested in, because he's just like one of these kind of man's man, blokey characters, and that was it. But I mean... we get to find out a bit more interesting thing about him during the character profile. But if anyone, listeners, have got anything to say about Len, want to sort of sell him to us, let us know. Let us know what you think. But here we go. Len Fairclough. He was born on the 5th of November, 1924, and he died on the 7th of December, 1983. His parents were Ned and Grace Fairclough, and he married twice. Once Nellie Briggs in 1949, and then he married Rita in 1977.
He had one child, Stanley Fairclough, in 1950. He first appeared 25th of January in 1961, which is episode 14, and he last appeared on the 11th of May 1983, and he appeared 1,769 times, which makes him the 19th most featured character, and he was played by Peter Adamson.
Yeah, so Peter had worked in the theatre and TV before before auditioning for Coronation Street, and at first he tried out for the roles of Dennis Tanner and Ken Barlow, and I can't kind of imagine him in those roles at all. Well, neither could the producers, because at the time Adamson was 30, which was considered too old.
Past it.
Yeah, because Ken was like in late teens, I think, when early 20s maybe, when he was first in it. So he was given...
Bit of a chance, wasn't he?
Yeah, instead of those parts, he was given the role of the insurance man, Harry Bailey, but that part was sadly later dropped. There was going to be an insurance man in the first episode, but they didn't need him anymore, although the character of Harry Bailey did come back many years later.
Oh, that's interesting.
But not played by Peter Adamson, of course. So he tried again for a part in Corrie. He really wanted to be on Corrie.
He knew he was onto a good thing.
Yeah. When Coronation Street extended past its initial run of 12 episodes, I think, the character of Len Fairclough was introduced, and he was just supposed to be like a drinking buddy of Harry Hewitt. So Len auditioned for that part, and he got it. So Len was at first just like kind of a side character who didn't have much about him, but then when the character of Harry was axed, Len became like the main alpha male of the show. Yeah, like I said before, a real bloke, kind of a man's man, bit of a temper, and he was actually the first character to swear in Coronation Street. Oh yes, he said bloody in episode 170.
My goodness.
To make it worse, I think I might have read this right. I might be remembering this right. He might have said it to Emily Bishop.
Shut up, Emily, you
Nugent,
bloody
sorry,
cow.
Emily at the time. Emily's not a bloody cow, take that back. He was also a bit of a womanizer and attracted to headstrong women. Although he still believed that their place was at the home, I don't think he would have played on a cricket team with an 18-year-old girl on. No, but that was kind of what he was like, kind of in his personal life, I guess. But in the building trade, he had a reputation of a friendly and trustworthy worker. So there's, like many of the older characters, there's been a big backstory written for Len. He was born in Liverpool in 1924, but grew up in Weatherfield during the Depression. In 1938, he left school to become an apprentice bricklayer, but left that to join the Navy during World War II, where he served with the Russian convoys protecting ships.
Cargo ships.
Yes. In 1946, he came back to Weatherfield and then back to the building trade. In 1949, he married Nellie Briggs after having fought with his mate Harry Hewitt over her. And then baby came along, baby Stanley, in 1950, but Len was as bad a father as he was a husband. He left his wife at home to cook, clean, and look after the baby most nights, while he just went and sipped pints in the Rovers.
Dreadful man.
Yeah, so that was the backstory for him. We then join him in Coronation Street. Like I said, he came in 1961, but the main story I think that happened with Len was in 1962 when Nellie got fed up of him and left him. She discovered that he'd been doing private building jobs, including building a fireplace for Elsie Tanner. Now, there was always a bit of a thing between Elsie and Len, and they were always good friends, but the Coronation Street writers, I think, didn't want it to get into a romance, even though it was nearly there on a couple of occasions. So Nellie thought that there was something going on, so she left. She briefly returned to him, but she was humiliated when he was charged for assault after hitting a guy who was on a date with Elsie.
Oh dear.
So then she went for good, leaving Stanley with her. And all this happened without the character of Nellie ever appearing on screen, which was a bit bizarre.
How strange. So in 1963, Len was now self-employed at his own builder's yard on Maudsley Street. And so he goes through the divorce proceedings and he starts dating Elsie, though she turns down his proposal as she values their friendship too much.
Yeah, I think lots of fans at the time, or some fans at the time, wanted for them to be a couple, but this was maybe a way of saying no, they're just friends, just good friends.
Now, unfortunately, a similar thing happened to Len as is happening to Jason right now. He was forced to sack his apprentices, Joey Booth and Eddie Thomas, after he had to pay £50 when Minnie Caldwell injured herself on a staircase that he had built.
Ooh, I wonder whether they'd used poor quality wood on Minnie's staircase.
In 1964, Nellie dies and Len proposes to Elsie again, and then she agrees to a trial marriage, which is where they get the trial period for jobs from.
Do you think that was Coronation Street's initial trial, very first trial period?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, they don't have trial periods enough on Coronation Street anymore. It used to be every couple of months somebody would be on a trial period or something.
I think we took the mick out of it too much. But unfortunately, she wasn't a good enough wife because she refused to cook for him or sleep with him, so he backed off.
Well, that's what else a wife's good for.
Don't know.
So
maybe she spent all his money.
In 1965, he gave Jerry Booth his job back, and he became a partner of the building firm. 1966, he proved he was not just good at building; he was good at counselling as well. He became councillor. He stood against Annie Walker in the council by-elections and then promised to fence off the canal, which was one of the things that made so many people vote for him.
Well, it's a good idea because
dangerous.
People keep falling in and dying, don't they?
Yes. But then when he was voted through, he went on to oppose the move to fence it off, so that didn't make him particularly popular at all. And then Elsie's 5-year-old grandson ended up falling into the canal, of course, so Elsie was not very happy with Len.
Did he die?
No, I think he was hooked out.
In 1967, after Len invested £300 in a property deal that went through, Jerry insists they form a limited company and Emily Nugent should do the books. Then Stanley young Stanley, returned to Weatherfield to work for his dad, and Len nearly dies rescuing him from a fire in the yard.
Such drama.
But Stanley wasn't grateful because he went back home to Nottingham not long after that.
Yeah, I think he realised that he was no good in the building trade.
I think he probably thought to himself, if I stay on Coronation Street, I'm just going to die just to make drama for Len.
That was a warning. It was like one of those little fake heart attacks that you have.
Exactly.
1968, he got a plumbing contract for the unpopular new Maisonettes on the other side of the street. He bought number 9 from Ken Barlow when Ken and Valerie moved over to the Maisonettes. He knocked down his old house and expanded the yard there. Also at that time, Jerry Booth left Weatherfield, but by that time Len had employed Ray Langton, who was also lodging with him. That doesn't sound very interesting, but what does sound interesting in 1968 was he was suspected of murdering Elsie's new husband, Steve Tanner, after their short marriage hit the rocks.
In 1969, Elsie gives Jack Walker £300 to give to Len to help his debt-ridden business because she knew that he would never accept it from her. However, he decides to use it to start a new life with the town hall clerk, Janet Reed, who was Ken's, later on, his second wife.
Yeah.
Janet ends the relationship when she feels that Len is smothering her, and Len thinks that Elsie is behind Janet's decision, and he gives her a slap. After it is revealed that the money actually came from her, she ends their friendship.
Yeah.
But they end up being friends again.
Yeah, they were kind of friends next year because he was a witness at her wedding to Alan Howard. So 1970 enters into a partnership with Ray. There's lots of different partnerships, business partnerships. I think this is another reason why I don't like this kind of character, because it's all to do with business. It's like all the factory stuff. Partnerships and that aren't that interesting. He proposed to Anita Reynolds, who was one of the barmaids in that year as well, but he changed his mind when he realised that she was just young. She was young enough to be his daughter. 1972 was when the most memorable kind of romance from for Len showed up, though. Rita Littlewood. The Weatherfield Night. What was he called? Weatherfield Nightingale or something. She was singing in a nightclub, and he'd previously helped her to find accommodation because her home was about to be demolished. So they started seeing each other because she had a common law husband, Harry, and she'd been beaten up by him because he'd suspected there was something going on between Len and Rita. So then, on the opening night of the Capricorn Club, Len was shown up by Rita, who got into a fight with another woman. That I'd like to see. His association with her hurt his chances to become mayor of Weatherfield, though. And then that was when Alf became mayor. But Len became deputy mayor, though, so that was okay.
That's all fine then, isn't it?
But he did split up with Rita over it because of how much she showed him up.
In 1973... Excitement, the Capricorn Club was bought by someone who wanted to use it to make pornographic films. So
hilarious.
Len convinced Rita to leave. I don't know why, because she could have made good money. The pair get back together and he makes her the manager of the cabin, which he just bought. When Len refuses to pay VAT on a job done for a firm that had gone bust before paying them, he ends up in court. And Jerry ends up paying the money and is made a partner along with Len and Ray by the end of the year. Fascinating stuff.
I know, it is. It really is. 1974, Len discovered the Coronation Street was going to be demolished. No! But he didn't tell everybody that, of course. Rita wouldn't let him sell the cabin, which was now in her name. I don't know, money reasons. Then she told everybody the truth. Emily even threw a brick through Len's window in protest.
And she's never forgot it, and she's still dining out on it to this day.
Yeah.
The time she threw a brick through someone's window.
Up a tree, brick through the window. What a rebel that Emily is. Yeah. But anyway, the plan eventually got voted out, as you might have guessed by the fact that Coronation Street is still there today.
Spoil it. Len and Rita then got engaged, but he wouldn't commit to a date, so she called it off. And then they start seeing other people, which is not really a good sign of a marriage.
No. 1975, he had a bit of a relationship with Bette Lynch, but she gave him the heave-ho because he said he was only interested in having sex with her.
In 1975?
Yeah.
They allowed to say sex on television?
That was like the era of
promiscuity.
Yes. Ray moved out of number 9 when he married Deirdre, and Jerry died of a heart attack in 1975 as well. So not a great year for Len.
Harsh.
1976, Rita knocked Len out when he refused to give her time off from the cabin to go to Torquay to sing.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, he was he wanted to sort of control. He was a very controlling kind of guy over Rita, so he wouldn't let her go. He pretended to be sicker than he actually was, though, when he came out of hospital, because he liked Rita looking after him. 1977 was when he actually made an honest woman out of Rita, though 16.9 million viewers watched that episode, which was the highest rated episode of the 1970s. He begged her not to take a 4-month singing contract in Tenerife, and she was like, well, either I go to Tenerife or you marry me. So,
but she won't give up nightclub singing anyway.
Yeah. He got drunk on Alf Stag Night in 1978.
That's a weird beer. What's that?
What?
He got drunk on Alf Stag Night. It's not a beer.
During Alf Stag Night. And I think the policemen took him home, and Rita was so disgusted by his behaviour that she refused or she denied knowing him.
Can you do that? Really?
Yeah, but I'm not going to come home drunk from anyone who's stag do.
Yeah.
He was then taken back to the police station and was accused of making advances on the female police officer in the car. He was found not guilty in court, but it was so scandalous that he lost his position in his political party, and he got in deep trouble with Rita over it. Later on that year, he lost £3,000 of building materials in a fire, and Rita was forced to sing in a second-rate men's club to help earn money.
Indignity.
He took on Eddie Yates on the yard later in that year, when Ray split up from Deirdre and emigrated to Holland.
In 1979, he continued to be a disappointment to Rita, and he only got her a box of chocolates for Christmas.
That was the last straw.
That is terrible. So in 1980, Rita walks out on Len after he refuses to do anything about the alterations she wanted to the house to make it livable. But he finds her in Blackpool 2 months later and promises to be a better husband.
Yeah. Does he do it? Well,
No,
not particularly. 1981, they had a bit of an adoption story. Rita wanted children, but they were told they were too old to adopt. But they did become foster parents for a bit. So they had John Spencer, a 13-year-old boy, and then Sharon Gaskell, who Len was particularly fond of. He also rebuilt number 7 that year, which had collapsed in 1965. So there was a gap between numbers 5 and 9 for all that time. He built it up, and then Rita kind of twisted his little finger to let him move in there. 1983, he started an affair with Marjorie Proctor, a widow, and on the way back from seeing her one night, he fell asleep at the wheel and was killed in a crash.
Now, poor Marjorie Proctor.
Why?
Second man she's killed there.
Yeah.
No one thinks about it from Marjorie Proctor's point of view, do they?
Is she a black widow?
Maybe.
Yeah, reading that profile of Len there wasn't too much exciting, was there?
It's all very standard Corrie.
Yeah, he's kind of considered as being quite a big character from back then in Coronation Street, isn't he? I mean, if you think about Coronation Street in the olden days, he's one of the big names, and he was in 1,700 episodes, but he didn't seem to do
It's not to do
much.
with what storylines are in, it's to do with how you play them, because sometimes we read back characters who've had quite small parts and going, oh yeah, they were in that storyline. Oh yeah, they were in that storyline. And you just forget because they're so bland that they just suck everything to a black hole.
I don't even know whether was Len
I
bland?
don't know because I've never really watched it with him in, but I'm just saying perhaps.
In my mind, he's kind of more important because he was married to Rita, and that Rita's obviously carried on going all this time. But I think he was a very main character, but just for
he's lost to posterity.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe some people can write in and tell us whether Len was actually more interesting than he seems to be. But maybe he's just one of those characters that we don't like. I mean, I think he seems very much like Owen, for example. Owen being a
rough alpha male.
Yeah, which that kind of character doesn't
really
interest
wash with me.
Doesn't
No,
interest
not
me, but you've got to appeal to everyone in Corrie.
Sensitive chaps
Oh,
like
that's
you.
twice in a row you told me that on the podcast. How romantic, how sickening. So, it was quite sad what ended up happening to Peter. Oh yeah, you're lovely. I go through people just like you.
What does that mean?
Editors and
job description is my personality. Yeah, so this guy didn't really have a good career on Coronation Street, did he? He was suspended
not behind the scenes.
in 1969 for 2 months because he recorded a film so drunk that he was so drunk at the time that had to be reshot the following week.
Yeah, that whole scene had to be reshot. I think drinking problems continued a bit. There's a couple of quotes on Wikipedia about the incident. Harry Kershaw, the executive producer at the time, said, "Peter Adamson's drunkenness hung around him like an albatross around the programme's neck, and my responsibilities as a producer were beginning to weigh very heavily indeed. At each story conference during this period, we would include the character in our projected plots, hoping that Peter Adamson's problems would miraculously disappear. This was wishful thinking at its most stupid, and it rapidly became evident as matters grew worse that drastic actions needed to be taken."
He wouldn't mince his words there, did he?
No.
He also got in trouble in 1983.
Yeah, this was the final straw for him.
That he was written out of the show for writing derogatory articles about the show. I don't know what he wrote, but
No, I don't know.
maybe
Actually,
they were all poo heads. Before they could see he could get suspended, though, he was accused of indecently assaulting 2 young girls in a swimming pool. He was found not guilty, but he later confessed to a freelance reporter who got him drunk the following year that he did do it.
This sounds like it could have been a storyline in Coronation Street, doesn't it?
I
It's
thought
really
you were going to
bad.
say it sounds like it's something that could have happened to somebody on Coronation Street recently, because this is all that's coming out
Oh,
with all
yeah.
celebs now. He sold his memoirs for £70,000 to help him pay legal bills.
Yeah, I think Granada didn't
they
help him.
told him not to say anything.
Yeah, they said don't speak to the press about it, but he did. He sold his memoirs.
So this is all
So
when
they're
he's
like-
still on the show. All
Yeah.
of this happened when he's still on the show.
But it
And
didn't
then-
last for long.
Then he last appeared on screen several months before the character was killed off, because his character was working away from home.
Yeah.
Following his stint on Coronation Street didn't really go too well for him because of his drinking problems.
Well, he had
went-
he was on the West End for a few years, but roles just started drying up because he had kind of a bad reputation in the biz. He had his drinking problem, and yeah, he kind of fizzled out of show business, which is it's quite sad, really, because back in the height of Coronation Street, he was probably a millionaire by today's standards. I mean, he wouldn't have had £1 million back then, but he fell
That's
from
what
a
it
big
says.
height.
It does say that. He had surgery for bowel cancer in 1990, was declared bankrupt in 1991, and spent the rest of his days living in a rented flat. Where does this come from, this information? Buying cut-price
Reputable
food
sources,
and
as
saving
always on the
£5 a
podcast.
week towards his own funeral. He died of stomach cancer in 2002, and all he had left in the world was £5,000 for his eldest son, even though he had once been worth
It's really,
millions.
really sad.
So you say millions there.
Yeah, he was worth millions in modern terms, I think I meant.
Well, either way, he was a rich guy, and he ended up dying in poverty, basically.
It's sad. It's so sad to think that can happen, and it makes me
Well,
think, like,
actually,
is there
if I-
anyone on Coronation Street at the moment, like, so a big character that could happen to? Big
Dunno.
actor, I hope not. Final quote from Bill Podmore then about him. This is, I guess, to end on a bit more of a positive note, from Bill Podmore. "Peter had a great rugged quality, the right face and exactly the right build. His toughness only gave more weight to his acting skills. Off the set, he could be as abrasive as the man he played. It was an underlying part of his nature which he passed on to Len. He turned him into a wonderfully earthy character who didn't mince words, but was never unattractive to the legions of fans." That's kind of a nice thing to say.
Yeah, very tactful.
Yeah, but I mean, that's about all we've got to say about Len Fairclough, isn't it?
Yep.
Had not much legacy for us. But,
Not really.
but definitely
I'm
there is for
sure-
the programme. He was such a big character. He's just, like, not the kind of character that I would have wanted to watch.